Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are having a very serious and solid conversation dedicated to legislation, but I would like to commence my presentation with a beautiful video clip by a famous Ukrainian journalist, and I would like to explain why I want to play this video. It's a great demonstration that reflects what happens if legislation goes awry and when institutions are not functional. So let's watch the video and then I will continue. It happens in each and every Ukrainian house, every yard, every city, this specific moment. People are complaining. People are railing. Have you tried to have it solved at district level? And everyone is just shrugging shoulders. People continue complaining. What about the local authorities? The local authorities shrug their shoulders. What about the municipality? The municipality shrugs their shoulders. What about the people? People continue complaining. Did you try the regional level? The regional authorities also shrugging their shoulders. What about people? People are complaining. What the heck? Bloody officials. Officials are also shrugging their shoulders. What about people that continue complaining? What about doctors? Did you try there? The Minister of Health shrugs their shoulders. What about police? It's the same with the police. What about people? People continue complaining and railing. They complain about shortness of breath and some rash on their skin. Rash. People need to be heard by the government. But what about elderly people? Young people don't really care about anything. The elderly complain as well. That was the most important Ukrainian news in the past 20 years. People complain and authorities shrug shoulders. The authorities complain and everyone shrugs their shoulders, or vice versa.
Тішуся, що вам сподобалося, як кажуть, в кожному жарті є.
I'm very happy that you liked it. There's a grain of joke in every joke, as they say. Everything else is the truth. I think you will agree that this piece of news over the past 20 years that people complain and the authorities shrug their shoulders is very suggestive of our situation, and I think it's natural because people care about the comfort of their living. As for the government or authorities shrugging their shoulders, it depends on the government, it depends on public officials, but a lot is also contingent on the legislation, which is the centerpiece of our bloc. We have the newly adopted law 5655, but it hasn't taken effect yet, by the way. I have this impression that this law was drafted to give just one option to the local authorities, which is shrugging their shoulders. Especially, it's true of those people who already have an active stance or intend to have an active stance. Here in the city of Lviv, we don't want to just shrug their shoulders, we want to take a proactive stance. Therefore, in the past 2 years, within my capacity, I've been speaking out about this law being evil. If this law takes effect, it will bring a lot of trouble and setbacks for our cities and municipalities, but I would like to be more specific and get down to the meat and potatoes of my presentation. I will use specific examples to elucidate my arguments. Just imagine that you are a resident of a building and there's some new development nearby. You know that there should be 4 floors in that building, but the development company is faring well, and out of a sudden you can see 9, 10 stories. What will you do? You will go to the municipality, to the city hall, and you will let them know that this high-rise building is being constructed, even though it was supposed to be a 4-story building. What will the answer of the municipality be? You know very well that for about 3 years, we've had this moratorium on the architectural and construction control. So in this specific situation, the local government cannot really conduct an inspection. The local authority cannot really terminate this construction. The only thing they can do is go to the Urban Development and Construction Inspectorate. And this inspectorate is the controlling body responsible for construction permits. In 2023, we have received about 200 petitions on spontaneous or illegitimate construction. Whenever we receive such a complaint, we forward everything to Kyiv, to the inspectorate there. And how many permits there? What do you think? Zero. No response whatsoever, no feedback whatsoever, which is a very sad situation. There's another aspect that I would like to draw your attention to. So we have this moratorium in place, but there's another innovation in our law that beats it all, which is private control. The wrapping is really nice, so it's wrapped up in this competition wrapping, but the essence is very simple. I build myself, I control myself, and I commission myself. The municipality is on the sidelines, it's not really part of the process, and it's really bad because you don't really have the balance, you don't really have the checks and balances system, which is crucial for the functioning of any democratic processes. I would like to briefly draw your attention to some of the points and novelties that we have with regard to urban planning requirements and restrictions, some of the inputs that we need to ensure. You might know that the effective legislation is quite tolerant and liberal towards the construction businesses, and as the previous speaker referenced, there are only several restrictions or limits that the city can incorporate into their decisions and decrees. The urban planning calculations are not required anymore. At least the only thing that we can do as the municipality is request this document, and usually our request is granted. Law 5655 includes a direct provision that forbids us to receive any direct documents with the section of the ones envisaged by the law. And the only documents envisaged by the law include the application form, the land title, and the ownership title. So you cannot really require any other documents, like, for example, the consent of the neighbors. There's a ban on requesting these documents, and if you do that, you will be liable. Basically, municipalities have to make blind decisions. They cannot even have a look at what this future building will look like. If neighbors in the neighboring buildings have some complaints or they have some critical remarks, if they disagree, the municipality does not really have any leverage. Any physical persons or legal entities have been deprived of the right to conduct any inspections whatsoever. Is this what we call democracy? Or maybe this is their understanding of the fight against corruption, at least according to the drafters of this law. I think it's nonsense, it's preposterous, and this is something that should not be accepted in a normal democratic society. Some more words about urban planning requirements and limits. We have a narrow list of grounds for rejection. If there are some mistakes, for example, or if there are non-conformities in urban planning documentation. Unfortunately, this provision has been removed from the new law. Like, for example, the designation of a land plot. And this designation of a land plot is very broad and can be interpreted in multiple ways. So you position a future building as one thing, but in fact, you construct something building. In the documents, you write down that this is reconstruction, and then in the process, you change it to new construction. So my point here is that we have a lot of untypical and ludicrous norms and regulations. My view is that the purpose of this law is to compel the municipalities to grant document without really understanding what future development will look like. I have a question then. Why do we need local governments? Why do we need local elections? Why do we need communities? I mean, if you can sort things out in this way, why have all these tools and mechanisms in place? The topic of my presentation is let communities decide. The term urban planning or urban development demonstrates that this is something that is done in a city, this is something that is done in a community. So we cannot really deprive cities and communities of this right. If you have some sort of government at a distance of 500 or 1,000 kilometers, they cannot really know what is best for a specific city or community. It's all about the principle of subsidiarity. It's all about the people in power being close to the end user, to the end consumer. And it's particularly important in the area of urban planning and development. But there's some recent good news. The European Parliament adopted a separate resolution that stipulates that our law is not in line with the EU principles, and the European Parliament recommends that the President of Ukraine not sign the document. And I strongly believe that this is the way to go about it. Briefly, that's it. Should you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
I have two questions for you. First of all, there's regulations on the level of the state. You told about it, but on the level of the city, do you think you can change or improve some of the laws as well? What would your dream be of the regulations on local level?
Thank you very much for the question. My colleague from Wolfsburg said the right thing. He talked about different levels of regulation. And by the way, he highlighted that self-governance is integral. We cannot really centralize all the processes. As regards the city of Lviv, I believe that each and every community is unique. Each and every community has its peculiarities, its characteristics and qualities. And in this context, our chief architect, Mr. Anton Kolomitsev, has elaborated some guidelines or recommendations for residential construction. These are just recommendations or guidelines. They're not really mandatory for implementation, but these are the right guidelines, and it's our element of awareness raising and education. These guidelines have been in place for about 1 year, and we can see that the bulk of developers and construction companies heed these recommendations. We can basically view this as our approach to urban planning and development in Lviv.
They should not be mandatory in your opinion?
Well, they are not mandatory as of now. If you are interested, in my opinion, I believe that cities need to have more leeway or wiggle room to sort of adopt some general rules for everyone.
Second question is, you mentioned already the German example. What were the most inspiring moments of today, or maybe suggestions that Julian, Anna, Mark, Martin have made? Because you're the final speaker, so you have the final word.
Thank you very much for this unique opportunity to wrap up our block. Every speaker during this block expressed some interesting opinions. I really like the German model because of its systematic approach, and they have this exhaustive or comprehensive approach to legal regulation. But there's one point that I would like to emphasize. A lot of people state that we need to focus on urban development and planning documentation, that we need to sort out documentation. I concur with that, but at the same time, we need to understand that Ukraine still has a long way to go. We might not be even aware of it, but only several years ago, a new territorial regime was implemented in Ukraine. And we still have a lot of work to do and a long way to go, because we need to develop integrated plans, and based on that we need to craft master plans, but we are definitely on the right track. We need to continue down this pathway. And as for the elaboration of the urban development code, I want to express my profuse gratitude to our MP Anna Bondar, because she is utilizing a very systematic and participatory approach to this process. She's doing everything within her capacity to hear all the voices, and it's a drastic change in comparison with the approach utilized while drafting Law 5655. Basically, that law was just pushed forward and no one was listened to. It was just about the result for the country, but not for the communities.